The millionaire from the Pink Nebula. The snow began as a hush, a slow drifting of white that softened the fields and telephone wires, then thickened into a silver curtain that erased distances until the town's edge became a rumor and the horizon a breath. Through that pale silence, the sky split with a seam of pink light, like a satin ribbon unspooling from the dark. And the thing that descended was not a star or a storm, but a vessel veined with luminescent threads, humming in a key the wind seemed to understand. It didn't crash so much as a light, shedding frost from its facets. And when the hull unfolded like the petals of a glass flower, a woman stepped out in a short dress that caught every snowflake as a spark, her skin glowing with a warm rose radiance that made the cold shy away. She was Anne, a millionaire by some measure that meant everything among the constellations and nothing at all in this white field. And she carried not jewels or banners, but the steady hand of a small girl with violet eyes who watched the snow land on her palm and melt into little stars. The child's glow was gentler, candle-like, and when the wind tugged at them both, the mother's light leaned back as if to shield her. Above them, the ship sealed itself and dimmed, a slumbering lantern. The only sound was the soft hiss of falling snow and the thin, aching note in the mother's breath when she reached into a hip-slung holster and drew a device, the size of a soapstone, her alien smartphone, faceted and translucent, now blinking an embarrassed grey. She tapped a glyph, and then another, a language that ran like water, but with each attempt the signal spun and died, as if Earth were a quilt of quiet that refused to carry distant music. She tried to smile for the child, brushing a strand of snow-wet hair from the girl's brow. And in that small maternal gesture her royalty dissolved, leaving only a woman in the winter, luminous and lost. Footsteps stitched across the frozen pasture, careful, human. The sound of someone who feared to startle what he didn't understand. A man came into view through the slow blur of snowfall, his coat a dark wave, scarf flung like a flag of truce, breath fogging in rhythmic ghosts. His name was Elias, a cartographer of lonely evenings and star maps, a keeper of small faiths like thermoses and constellations, and he stopped a polite distance away because her light rearranged the snow around her into a halo, and because the girl held her mother's hand like a lighthouse holds the shore. "Can I help?" he asked, and the question felt fragile, a paper boat set on a wide river. Eliane tilted her head, considering him with eyes that carried nebulae in their patience, and held up the sullen phone as if that single object explained both her wealth and her helplessness. The screen bloomed for a second with a whirl of runes, then dimmed, and she made a rueful sound that translated cleanly into Earth's old language of bad luck. "Your world is a quiet room," she said, voice musical, "and my device only sings to open doors." Elias, who had once soldered radios with his father and knew the comfort of making signals, reached out without touching and said, "There's warmth nearby," nodding toward the tree line where his cabin crouched like a secret he wasn't sure he should share. The girl squinted at him, then at the snow, then at her mother, and squeezed tighter. Eliane smiled, sudden, dangerous, kind, and the snowfall mirrored it, brightening as if every flake had chosen to be a petal. When she stepped forward, the snow did not cling to her bare knees. It steamed and vanished, and Elias realized with a shock both practical and tender that she was warmer than the night, that the cold could not find her so long as her light remembered how to burn. He tucked his gloved hands into his pockets to keep from offering the coat she did not need, and together they began the slow walk, the ship a sleeping star at their backs. The path to the cabin wound between spruce boughs heavy with powder, their tips bowing like courtiers before Alien's glow, and as they walked, the world arranged itself into vignettes, the girl laughing softly when a flake landed on her tongue, the mother lifting her chin to breathe the winter like a dare, Elias finding himself aware of the crease of his boot prints and the way they lined up beside hers, how his mortal darkness marched neatly next to her shimmering wake. Conversation came in cautious threads, stitched with pauses, and in those pauses the night said things about distances and choices. Alien asked names of the snow, which she called the sky falling to rest, of the town, which Elias called small, on purpose, and of the constellations, which needed no translation because she knew them by their other names. When the girl grew sleepy, Alien gathered her up with the practice that makes difficult things look easy, and for a breath Elias saw the curve of her shoulder under the short dress, the warmth of her light reflected in the child's soft cheek, and something in his chest gave a quiet. Sealed room he had been keeping for years opened a window. At the cabin he fumbled for the key with gloves too thick for tenderness, and Alien, amused, lifted her palm. The latch glowed, clicked, yielded, but the door remained a door, wood and hinges and welcome, and he pushed it wide on a room full of simple comforts, a wood, 2 chairs, a table freckled with star charts, and a kettle like a promise, while the stove caught and began to narrate the story of fire to dry kindling. Alien set the sleeping girl on the threadbare couch and draped a wool blanket over her. The juxtaposition, so sweet and strange. Millionaire mother with a blanket whose history could be told in burst that Elias thought, irrationally, of vows. The alien phone lay on the table like a sulking gem, and at Alien's nod he brought his toolbox and arrayed wires and hopes. But each time the device murmured to the room. The room shrugged in Earth's old way. Here we listen with ears, not with light. Sometimes, Elias said, surprised by the steadiness of his voice, the only signal is another person, and when she looked up at him, the stove took that moment to sigh and throw a flirt of sparks, as if conspiring to make metaphors feel real. Snow kept falling, slower now, each flake a coin spent by the sky for the privilege of landing where light and warmth had made a republic. The child dreamed in the language of new places, turning once and resting her palm against her mother's dress as if to certify its sheen. Alien stood near the window where Frost wrote delicate biographies in the corners, and the glow from her skin made the glass bloom with pink. Elias poured talk with ceremony, human hospitality put on its best boot sand when their fingers brushed in the transfer. It was like 2 notes, harmonizing, small and perfect. They spoke in paragraphs after that, the kind that take the scenic route. She described a city whose buildings were tuned to the sunrise, markets that sold scents captured in glass, the way wealth among her people was measured by what light you could modify and what darkness you could soothe. He answered with stories that sounded poor but felt rich childhood summers along a river, a telescope bought used and cleaned with reverence, the first time he understood the Milky Way as a map instead of a mess. The alien phone, stubborn as a superstition, pulsed once and then gave itself to sleep. "It is all right," Alien said, as if forgiving a wayward star, and her gaze drifted to the girl, then returned to Elias with a softness that pushed the room closer around them. There was a magnetic hush, the kind that exists just before a candle accepts the match, and in it she stepped nearer, the hem of her short dress whispering against her thigh like a secret promising to behave. The romance that followed refused to hurry, preferring to be a slow, bright language of nearness, her head tipping toward his shoulder without quite touching, his hand hovering over the small of her back and choosing, at last, to rest against the warm air that, when she smiled, it wasn't triumph, it was recognition, as if she had found the missing frequency her phone could not. Outside, the snow lightened like a held breath released, and for one long, luminous moment, warmth and winter agreed to share a roof. Morning arrived like a shy guest, pale gold peeking between the spruce, turning every icicle into a stringed instrument. The girl woke first, sat upright with that clear-eyed composure children borrow from dreams, and padded to the window to press her palm against the frost and leave a print shaped like a small star. Alien, who had fallen asleep in the chair with her chin tilted and her light resting low and steady, opened her eyes and blinked at the changed world. One night, and already there were artifacts, an empty mug with a lip of sugar, a blanket with a new crease that remembered her shoulders, a human man who had learned the choreography of tending both a stove and a fragile, improbable hope. The phone, chastened, offered a faint glow. Elias tapped a single screw with a fingertip as if to greet an old rival and shrugged. "If it never works here," he said, "you still do," and it was a simple line, but it laid down roots in the room. The day made its usual arguments about errands and caution, and somewhere beyond the trees the world rehearsed its talent for suspicion. But in the small republic of the cabin a treaty had been signed, no papers, just three names learning to belong in the same sentence. When they walked back across the snow to see the silent ship, Alien to consider what leaving would mean, Elias to consider what staying would demand, their footprints overlapped until they were a single path. The wind had tidied the field, the vessel stood like a kept promise, and Alien touched its hull with the fondness of someone thanking a bridge. "I thought I came here to do business," she said, more to the winter than to him, "but the ledger has changed." The girl slipped her hand into Ilias's, as if she were an auditor of hearts, and nodded in solemn agreement with her mother. There were no grand declarations then, only the courage of ordinary ones. Kindling, breakfast, maps relabeled with the word home. And when the afternoon began to knit a new snow, fine as lace, Alien laughed softly, and the laugh was a vow, the kind made not by law or witness, but by light learning, again, where to land.